The dust on Lily Sinclair's worn leather boots told stories she could no longer speak aloud, and when the tall stranger with eyes like Kansas thunderstorms walked into her father's trading post that scorching July afternoon in 1879, she reached for her pencil and paper with trembling fingers that had become her only voice. Quinn York had ridden 3 days straight from Abilene with nothing but jerky and determination keeping him upright in the saddle, his bay mare wheezing from exhaustion as they finally reached El Dorado. The trading post was the first building on the edge of town, its weathered sign promising supplies and salvation. What he found instead was a woman with auburn hair tied back in a practical bun, eyes the color of spring grass, and a silence that filled the room more powerfully than any greeting. She stood behind the counter, her simple calico dress faded from too many washings, and watched him approach with an expression caught somewhere between wariness and curiosity. When Quinn tipped his hat and asked about provisions for the next leg of his journey, she picked up a pencil with practiced ease and wrote on a scrap of paper. "What do you need?" Quinn stared at the neat handwriting, then at her face. She met his gaze steadily, waiting. Most folks looked away when they realized she could not speak, but something in this cowboy's storm, gray eyes held different. Not pity, not discomfort, just acceptance. "Well," he said, leaning one elbow on the counter, "I need grain for my horse, some coffee if you have it, and maybe directions to a decent place to sleep that will not cost me my last dollar." She wrote quickly, "Grain in the back. Coffee is 3 cents a pound. Mrs. Henderson runs a boarding house 2 streets over. Clean beds, fair prices." "You write faster than most folks talk," Quinn observed, a slight smile touching his weathered face. "That is a useful skill." Something flickered in her expression, surprise maybe, or the beginning of trust. She wrote again, "Most people do not think so. Most people are fools," Quinn replied simply. He pulled off his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting, and ran a hand through it. "Name is Quinn York. I am looking for work if you know anyone hiring. I am good with horses, better with cattle, and I can fix just about anything that breaks." Lily studied him for a long moment. He was tall, probably 6 feet or more, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work, and a sun-bronzed face lined from squinting against prairie winds. His hands were calloused, his clothes dusty but mended with care. Everything about him suggested a man down on his luck, but not on his pride. She wrote, "I am Lily Sinclair. My father owns this place. He might need help in the warehouse. Might I speak with him?" Lily shook her head and wrote, "He's making deliveries. Back tomorrow morning." Quinn nodded, glancing around the trading post. It was well stocked, but showed signs of neglect, dust gathering in corners, boxes stacked haphazardly. "Place could use some organizing," he said, not unkindly. "If you want, I could start working now. You can decide whether to pay me after your father returns and sees what I have done." She hesitated, pencil hovering over the paper. It was not proper for a young woman to be alone with a strange man, but there was something about Quinn York that felt solid, trustworthy. And Lord knew they needed help. Her father's back was not what it used to be, and customers had started going to the newer store on Main Street because this place looked tired. "All right," she wrote, "but I have a shotgun under this counter and I know how to use it." Quinn's laugh was warm and genuine. "I would expect nothing less from a woman running a trading post in Kansas. Now, before I start hauling boxes, might I trouble you for some water? My canteen ran dry an hour back." Lily nodded and disappeared through a door behind the counter, returning with a tin cup filled with cool well water, and a second cup she set down for herself. Quinn drank deeply, watching as she wrote something else. "You said you rode from Abilene. Long journey." "Needed to leave," Quinn said, setting down the empty cup. "Got tired of working for a man who thought his money made him better than everyone else. Figured El Dorado might have opportunities." "Why here?" Quinn shrugged. "Heard it was growing. Kansas is opening up, and towns like this need people who are willing to work. Besides, I always liked the name. El Dorado, City of Gold. Seems hopeful. Lily's expression softened slightly. She wrote, "Not much gold here, just wheat and cattle and dust. That is worth more than gold, if you ask me. Gold runs out. Land keeps giving if you treat it right." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, an understanding passing between them that needed no words. Then Quinn rolled up his sleeves and got to work. Over the next several hours, as the afternoon heat pressed down on El Dorado like a heavy blanket, Quinn transformed the warehouse section of the trading post. He reorganized boxes by type and weight, swept floors that had not seen a broom in months, and repaired a broken shelf that had been propped against the wall waiting for attention. Lily watched between customers, marveling at his efficiency and the way he worked without complaint, even when he discovered a family of mice had made a nest in a corner. When the sun started its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Quinn emerged from the back room covered in dust but satisfied. Lily had been tallying the day's receipts, but she looked up as he approached and immediately reached for her pencil. "You work hard, thank you." "Felt good to be useful," Quinn admitted. He glanced toward the door. "I should head to that boarding house before it gets full dark. Will you tell your father I will return in the morning to discuss employment?" Lily nodded, but then hesitated before writing, "Wait." She disappeared into the back again and returned with a small cloth bundle. "Bread and cheese, you said you only had jerky." The gesture clearly touched him. "That is kind of you, Miss Sinclair, truly." She ducked her head, unused to gratitude, and wrote quickly, "You earned it." Quinn tucked the bundle into his saddlebag after retrieving his horse from where he had tied her in the shade. Before mounting, he turned back to where Lily stood in the doorway of the trading post, framed by the golden light of the setting sun. "Miss Sinclair," he called, "I noticed you have not asked why I talk so much." She tilted her head, curious. "It is because I figure if you have not spoken in however long, someone ought to pick up the slack, and I have always been good at talking. So tomorrow, when I come back, I will tell you about the sunrise I saw this morning on the road, and the hawk I watched hunting mice in a field, and anything else that seems worth sharing. You can listen or not, write responses or not. Either way is fine by me." Lily stood frozen in the doorway, long after Quinn had ridden away toward the center of town, his words echoing in her mind. 3 years. It had been 3 years since that terrible night when her mother died screaming during a Comanche raid that left 4 people dead, and Lily so traumatized that when she opened her mouth, no sound would come out. The doctor said it was shock, that her voice might return with time, but 3 years was a long time, and she had grown used to the silence, even as it isolated her from the world. No one had ever offered to talk for them both. That night, lying in her small room above the trading post, Lily thought about storm-gray eyes and calloused hands and a voice that felt like safety. She had learned not to hope for much. Hope hurt too badly when it died. But something small and fragile unfurled in her chest anyway, like the first green shoot pushing through hard Kansas soil. Samuel Sinclair returned the next morning as promised. A robust man in his 50s with graying hair and a permanent limp from an old wagon accident. Lily had his coffee ready and had written out everything that happened the day before. Her father read the note twice, eyebrows rising. This Quinn York fellow reorganized the entire warehouse in one afternoon? Lily nodded emphatically. "And you trusted him enough to let him work?" She wrote, "Something about him felt right. You will understand when you meet him." Samuel studied his daughter's face, noting the animation there that had been missing for too long. Lily moved through life competently, but without spark, as though she was waiting for something to give her permission to fully exist again. If this stranger had put a little light back in her eyes, Samuel was inclined to give him a chance. Quinn arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, his horse fed and brushed, his own clothes beaten free of dust. He shook Samuel's hand with a firm grip and spoke plainly about his experience and his needs. I am not looking for charity, Quinn said. I will work hard for fair wages, and if you are not satisfied with my labor, you can dismiss me without obligation. Samuel, a good judge of character from decades of dealing with every type of person the frontier produced, hired him on the spot. Thus began a partnership that quickly became the talk of El Dorado. Quinn proved to be everything he claimed: tireless, skilled, and possessed of an easy manner that put customers at ease. But what really caught people's attention was the way he interacted with Lily Sinclair. He talked to her constantly, narrating his work like he was telling stories to an eager audience. While restocking shelves, he would describe the wagon train he had seen heading west last month, the family from Ohio with three red-headed children and a milk cow tied to the back. While fixing the trading post's front step, he recounted a storm he had weathered in a line shack when lightning struck so close he could smell the burned prairie grass for days. While measuring grain for customers, he would offer observations about the town, the weather, the way the light hit the church steeple at noon. Most people would have found his constant chatter annoying, but Quinn had a gift for storytelling. His voice was deep and melodic, with a cadence that made even mundane details interesting. And more importantly, he never demanded responses from Lily. He spoke, and she listened. And sometimes she would write replies that made him laugh or think. But he never made her feel like her silence was a problem to be solved. "See that woman who just came in?" Quinn said one morning, about a week after he started working there, keeping his voice low as he rearranged a display of canned goods. "Mrs. Patterson. She always buys exactly 2 tins of peaches, 1 bag of sugar, and a spool of thread, every Tuesday morning without fail. I bet she makes peach preserves every Tuesday afternoon." Lily, sorting through an order of new fabric bolts, glanced at the woman and then wrote, "Her daughter visits on Tuesdays. She brings peaches from her orchard." "Ah," Quinn said, grinning. "So I was half right. That is better than usual." She shook her head, but he caught the smile she tried to hide. The rhythm of their days developed naturally. Quinn handled the heavy work and dealt with customers who were uncomfortable with Lily's silence, which was unfortunately most of them. Lily managed the books, ordered inventory, and dealt with the customers who knew her. Samuel, relieved of much of the physical burden, spent more time making deliveries and developing relationships with suppliers. In the evenings after the trading post closed, Quinn often lingered to help Lily with closing tasks. This was when he told his best stories, sitting on the counter while she swept, or standing beside her while they counted the day's receipts. "I should tell you about my sister," Quinn said one evening, as twilight painted the sky purple. "Her name is Margaret, and she lives in Missouri with her husband and 4 children. She writes me letters that always start with 'Quinn York, you better not be getting yourself killed,' and end with 'Come home soon.' I have not seen her in 2 years." Lily paused in her sweeping to write. "Why not?" "Because I am restless," Quinn admitted. "Always have been." Margaret settled down at 19, married her childhood sweetheart, and never looked back. Me? I keep moving, looking for something I cannot quite name. Drives her crazy with worry. "What are you looking for?" Quinn was quiet for a long moment, really thinking about it. "A place that feels like home, I suppose. Somewhere I want to stay instead of leave. Does that make sense?" Lily nodded. She wrote, "I have never left El Dorado. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like." "Well," Quinn said, sliding down from the counter, "I could tell you. I have been to Dodge City, Wichita, Abilene, and a dozen towns too small to have proper names. Each one has its own character." And he did tell her, in rich detail, about prairies that stretched so far you could see the curve of the earth, about rivers that ran red with clay, about buffalo herds that darkened the horizon. Lily listened and imagined, and for the first time in 3 years, the world outside El Dorado felt accessible rather than frightening. Summer deepened into August, bringing heat that shimmered off the dirt streets and made tempers short. The trading post stayed busy as farmers prepared for harvest, and ranchers drove cattle to market. Quinn proved invaluable during this time, his strength and stamina allowing him to work from dawn until well past dusk without complaint. But it was during the quiet moments that Lily found herself watching him most. The way he was gentle with children who came into the store, crouching down to their level to hear their requests. The way he helped elderly Mrs. Chen carry her purchases home every Thursday, never mentioning her blindness. The way he broke up a fight between two drunk cowboys without throwing a single punch, just using his words and his steady presence to diffuse the situation. "You are staring," her father said one afternoon when Quinn was outside loading a wagon. Lily jumped, startled, and shook her head in denial. Samuel smiled knowingly. "He is a good man, Lily. The kind who comes along once in a lifetime. Your mother would have liked him." The mention of her mother made Lily's chest tighten. She wrote, "Do not. Do not what? Acknowledge that you are alive and 22 years old and allowed to notice a fine young man?" Lily's hand trembled as she wrote, "I cannot speak. What man would want that?" Samuel set down the harness he had been mending and came to stand before his daughter. "The right man would not care, and I think you know Quinn York is not bothered by your silence one bit. In fact, I think he rather likes you exactly as you are." Before Lily could respond, Quinn came back inside, bringing with him the smell of hay and sun-warmed earth. "Wagon's loaded, Mr. Sinclair. I can drive it over to the Johnson Ranch if you want." "That would be helpful, thank you. Lily, why don't you ride along? You have been cooped up in here all day, and the fresh air would do you good." Lily shot her father a look that promised retribution later, but she nodded and fetched her bonnet. Quinn brought the wagon around, and soon they were heading out of town on the dusty road that led to the Johnson Ranch 3 miles west. The late afternoon sun was less brutal than midday, and a slight breeze provided relief as the wagon rolled along. Quinn kept up a steady stream of commentary, pointing out a hawk circling overhead, a patch of wildflowers that had somehow survived the heat, a creek bed that had run dry. "Do you ever wish you could leave?" Quinn asked suddenly, his eyes on the horizon. "Just pack up and see what else is out there?" Lily considered the question carefully before writing. "Sometimes. But I am afraid." "Of what?" "Everything." Quinn glanced at her words and then at her face. "That is honest," he said quietly. "Fear is a hard thing to live with. I know something about that." Lily looked at him questioningly. "I told you I left Abilene because I did not like my boss," Quinn said. "That is true, but it is not the whole truth. I left because I was working for a ranch that was driving homesteaders off land they had rightful claim to. My boss wanted me to participate in burning out a family, a man and his wife and their baby daughter. I refused. He pulled a gun. I was faster." Lily's eyes widened. "I did not kill him," Quinn said quickly. "Just wounded his arm. But I had to leave after that, and I had to leave fast. So yes, I understand fear. I understand how it can control your choices." She wrote, "Do you regret it? Shooting him? No. Leaving my sister without saying goodbye in person? Yes. But we do the best we can with the situations we are given." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon creaking rhythmically. Then Lily wrote something else. "I used to talk all the time. My mother said I could chatter the ears off a scarecrow." Quinn smiled at the image. "What happened?" Lily's hand shook as she wrote. 3 years ago. Comanche raid. They killed 4 people, including my mother. I saw it happen. When it was over, I could not make sounds anymore." "I am sorry," Quinn said, and his voice carried genuine grief. "That is a terrible thing to survive." She wrote, "Everyone thinks I am broken." "You are not broken," Quinn said firmly, pulling the wagon to a stop. He turned to face her fully, his gray eyes intense. "You are changed, which is different, and maybe your voice will come back someday. Or maybe it will not. But that does not define your worth, Lily Sinclair. You are intelligent, capable, kind, and strong. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." Lily stared at him, her throat tight with emotions that had no outlet. Slowly, she reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on the wagon seat. Quinn looked down at their joined hands and then back at her face. I think you should know, he said softly, that I am developing feelings for you that go beyond friendship or working partnership. I understand if that is unwelcome. I will not mention it again if you prefer. But I believe in honesty, and I wanted you to know where my heart is heading. Lily's breath caught. She picked up her pencil with her free hand and wrote shakily, I feel the same. Quinn's face transformed, joy breaking through like sunrise. Yeah? She nodded, and then, emboldened by the privacy of the open prairie, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was brief and chaste and perfect, and when they pulled apart, Quinn was grinning like a fool. Well then, he said, his voice a bit unsteady, I suppose we should deliver these supplies before the Johnsons think we got lost. The ride to the Johnson ranch and back was filled with a new awareness, hands occasionally brushing, glances lingering longer than necessary. By the time they returned to El Dorado, the sun was setting and Lily felt like she was glowing from within. Samuel took one look at them and smiled. Good ride? Lily nodded, her cheeks pink. Excellent, her father said. Quinn, why don't you stay for supper? We are having stew, and there is plenty. Thus began a courtship that the town watched with fascination and, in some quarters, skepticism. How could a romance work when one party could not speak? But Quinn and Lily developed their own language, a mixture of his words, her written responses, and the thousand silent communications that passed between people who truly understood each other. Quinn taught her to ride faster and farther than she had in years, taking her out to see parts of Kansas she had forgotten existed. They would pack lunches and spend Sunday afternoons exploring creek beds and hilltops, Quinn narrating their adventures like an epic tale. And here, he proclaimed one Sunday in September, as they stood on a rise overlooking miles of golden wheat, Princess Lily surveyed her kingdom and found it good. Lily elbowed him playfully and wrote, I am not a princess. You are to me, Quinn said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter. She wrote, Then what are you? A knight? Just a cowboy, Quinn said. But a cowboy who is completely and utterly in love with you. Lily froze, her pencil hovering over the paper. They had been courting for 6 weeks, and while their feelings had been obvious, neither had used that particular word yet. She looked up at Quinn, who watched her with patient hope. She wrote carefully, I love you too. Quinn pulled her close, and they stood there on the hilltop as the September wind whispered through the grass. Two people who had found in each other exactly what they had been missing. But life on the frontier was never simple for long. In October, Samuel Sinclair collapsed while lifting a barrel of nails, his heart giving out with no warning. The doctor said he would recover with rest, but the incident forced a conversation about the future. I cannot run the trading post like I used to, Samuel admitted from his bed, looking older and frailer than Lily had ever seen him. We need to make decisions. Quinn, who had barely left their side since Samuel's collapse, spoke carefully. Sir, if you will permit me, I would like to ask for Lily's hand in marriage. I know it is sudden, and I know I do not have much to offer financially. But I love your daughter, and I swear I will spend my life taking care of her and making her happy. Samuel studied the young man who had walked into their lives just 3 months earlier and had become indispensable. Lily, what do you want? She did not hesitate. Yes. Then you have my blessing, Samuel said. But Quinn, I need to know your intentions for the trading post. It is Lily's inheritance. I think, Quinn said slowly, that we should expand it. El Dorado is growing. We could add a feed store section, maybe even start supplying the small ranches directly. I have contacts from my cattle work, and Lily has the head for numbers and organization. Together we could build something real. Samuel smiled. You have thought about this. Every night for the past month, Quinn admitted. I want to give Lily a future she can be proud of, A business we build together. They married in November, on a clear, cold day when the prairie grass had turned the color of deer hide and the sky was so blue it hurt to look at directly. Lily wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame, and carried wildflowers that Quinn had somehow found despite the season. The ceremony was held in the small church on Main Street, with half the town in attendance. When the minister asked if anyone objected, the silence was profound. And when he pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn cupped Lily's face gently and said, "I will love you forever, Lily York," before kissing her with a tenderness that made several women in the congregation sigh. At the reception held in the church hall, Quinn gave a toast that people would talk about for years. "My wife cannot speak with her voice," he said, standing with his arm around Lily's waist, "but she speaks with her actions, her kindness, and her heart. She has taught me that words are just one way to communicate, and often not the most important way. I am the luckiest man in Kansas, and I will spend my life proving worthy of the gifts she has given me." Lily, standing beside him, wrote on a card that Quinn read aloud. "My husband talks enough for both of us, which is good because he never lets me get a word in anyway." The crowd roared with laughter, and Quinn pulled her close, grinning. She is not wrong. They moved into a small house 2 blocks from the trading post, a simple 2-room structure that they immediately began improving. Quinn added a porch where they could sit in the evenings, and Lily planted flowers in boxes that she tended with care. Their home became a sanctuary, a place where Lily's silence was not a hindrance, but simply part of their normal. Quinn continued his habit of narrating life, and Lily discovered that living with someone who talked constantly was oddly soothing. His voice became the soundtrack to their domestic life, describing what he was doing as he fixed a fence, telling her stories as they cooked dinner together, reading aloud from newspapers and books in the evenings. "Listen to this," Quinn said one night in December, holding up a letter. "My sister Margaret has invited us to Missouri for Christmas. She says, and I quote, 'I need to meet the woman who finally got you to settle down before I die of curiosity.'" Lily smiled and wrote, "Should we go? Would you want to? It is a long journey in winter, and we would be gone at least 2 weeks." She wrote, "I want to meet your family, and I have never been outside Kansas." So they made the journey, Quinn driving a wagon they borrowed from a friend, bundled against the cold with bricks heated in the fire to keep their feet warm. Quinn narrated the entire trip, pointing out changes in the landscape, telling stories about towns they passed through, keeping Lily entertained through long, cold hours on the road. Margaret York Thornton was a whirlwind of energy, greeting them at her farmhouse door with squeals of delight and immediately pulling Lily into a hug. "Finally," she exclaimed, "my wandering brother stays in one place long enough to fall in love. Let me look at you." Lily submitted to the examination, feeling self-conscious but also charmed by Margaret's warmth. "Quinn wrote that you do not speak," Margaret said matter-of-factly. "That is fine. My youngest son barely says 10 words a day, and he is the sweetest child alive. Can you read and write?" Lily nodded and showed her the paper and pencil she always carried. "Perfect. Then we will have no problems at all. Come in, come in. You must be frozen." The 2 weeks in Missouri were revelatory for Lily. Margaret's family was loud and chaotic and loving, with 4 children ranging from 12 to 4 who accepted Lily without question. Margaret treated her like a sister, involving her in cooking and sewing, and long conversations where Lily wrote responses that Margaret read eagerly. "I am so grateful to you," Margaret told her one evening when they were alone in the kitchen preparing bread. "Quinn has been lost since he left home at 18, searching for something he could not name. But in his letters about you, he sounds found, settled in the best way." Lily wrote, "He saved me too. I was barely living before he arrived." Margaret reached over and squeezed her hand. "Then you are perfect for each other. That is how the best marriages work. You make each other more than you were alone." On the journey back to Kansas, Quinn was quieter than usual, thoughtful, Finally, as they crossed back into Kansas, he said, "Thank you for coming with me. I know it was hard to leave your father, especially with his health uncertain." Lily wrote, "He insisted, said we needed this time together. Margaret loved you, you know. She told me you were the sister she always wanted." Lily smiled and wrote, "I loved her too. Your nieces and nephews are wonderful." "Would you want that?" Quinn asked, his voice careful. "Children, I mean. We have never discussed it." Lily was quiet for a moment, then wrote, "Yes, but I worry. What if they inherit my silence? Then we will love them and teach them to write and raise them to know their worth is not determined by sound," Quinn said firmly. "But Lily, your silence is not something you inherited. It came from trauma. Any children we have will be just fine." She leaned against his shoulder as the wagon rolled through the winter landscape, feeling safe and loved and hopeful for a future she had stopped imagining was possible. They returned to El Dorado just before the new year of 1880, finding the town preparing for celebrations and Samuel much recovered, though clearly aged by his illness. The trading post had been managed by a neighbor in their absence, and they threw themselves back into work with renewed energy. Quinn's vision for expansion began to take shape. They secured a loan from the bank and built an addition to house feed and ranching supplies. Quinn's contacts from his cattle working days proved valuable, and soon they were supplying several of the smaller ranches in the area. Business boomed as word spread about their fair prices and reliable service. Lily discovered she had a talent for the business side, managing accounts with meticulous care and developing relationships with suppliers through written correspondence. One company owner wrote back, "Your letters are the clearest and most professional I receive. It is a pleasure doing business with you." By spring, they had hired 2 employees to help with the increased workload. By summer, they were the most successful trading post in El Dorado. And by fall, Lily realized she was pregnant. She told Quinn on a Sunday evening in September, exactly 1 year after he had first told her he loved her. They were sitting on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lily handed him a note that simply said, "We are going to have a baby." Quinn stared at the words for a long moment, then let out a whoop of joy that probably woke half the neighborhood. He pulled Lily into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "We are going to be parents." "Oh, Lily, this is the best news. Are you sure?" "When?" she wrote. "February." "And yes, I am sure." "February," Quinn repeated, his hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "Our child will be born in winter. They will be strong and resilient, just like their mother." The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Lily tired more quickly and found the smell of certain foods unbearable. Quinn adjusted immediately, taking over more of the physical work at the trading post and pampering Lily relentlessly. He talked to her growing belly constantly, telling their unborn child stories about Kansas and the frontier and all the adventures they would have. "You are going to love your mother," Quinn said one night, his head resting against Lily's stomach. "She is the strongest, kindest, bravest person I know. And she is beautiful, though she will not believe me when I tell her so. You and I will have to gang up on her, convince her of her own magnificence." Lily ran her fingers through his hair, filled with love so intense it almost frightened her. She had not known life could feel this full, this right. Samuel was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a grandfather, his health seeming to improve with the good news. "Your mother would have been so happy," he told Lily. "She always wanted grandchildren to spoil." The mention of her mother, usually painful, felt softer now. Lily wished desperately that her mother could have met Quinn, could have seen the life Lily was building. But she carried her mother's memory forward, planning to tell her child all about the grandmother they would never meet. Winter came early in 1881, with snow falling in January and temperatures dropping below freezing. Lily grew larger and more uncomfortable, struggling to find positions that did not make her back ache. Quinn was endlessly patient, rubbing her feet, adjusting pillows, reading aloud for hours to distract her from discomfort. Just a few more weeks, he promised as February began, and then we get to meet our child. I cannot wait. Labor started on a cold February morning with snow falling softly outside. Quinn fetched the midwife, Mrs. Patterson, who had delivered half the babies in El Dorado. Samuel paced in the main room while Quinn stayed with Lily, holding her hand and talking her through each contraction. You are doing so well, he murmured, wiping sweat from her forehead. So strong, my love, just breathe. I am right here. Lily gripped his hand hard enough to hurt, but Quinn never flinched. She could not scream or cry out, but her face showed her pain clearly. Quinn talked constantly, his voice a lifeline she clung to as the hours stretched on. Finally, as evening darkened the windows, a baby's cry filled the room. A boy, Mrs. Patterson announced, wrapping the infant in a clean blanket. A healthy baby boy. Quinn's face crumpled with relief and joy as the midwife placed the baby in Lily's arms. He was red and wrinkled and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that clearly worked just fine. Hello, Quinn whispered, touching one tiny hand. Hello, son. Welcome to the world. Lily looked down at her baby, tears streaming down her face. She had never felt anything like the overwhelming love that crashed over her. This tiny person, part her and part Quinn, was everything. She looked up at her husband, who was crying unabashedly, and mouthed the words, "Thank you, thank you," Quinn corrected, kissing her forehead. "You did all the work. You are amazing." They named him Thomas Samuel York, after no one in particular but because the name felt right. Tommy, as he quickly became known, was an easy baby, content to nurse and sleep and observe the world with dark eyes that seemed to take in everything. Quinn proved to be a devoted father, carrying Tommy in a sling while he worked at the trading post, narrating every action for his son the way he had for Lily. Now we are measuring out cornmeal, he would say, and this gentleman wants 5 pounds, so we use the scale like so. Lily watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again. The tenderness Quinn showed, the endless patience, the way he sang off key lullabies at 2 a.m, all of it made her grateful for the day he had walked into the trading post and accepted her silence without question. Tommy thrived, growing into a chubby, happy baby who laughed easily and reached for everything. At 6 months, he started babbling, making sounds that gradually formed into words. The first word he said was Dada, which made Quinn insufferably proud. The second word was Mama, which he said while looking directly at Lily. She froze, tears springing to her eyes. Tommy could speak. Despite her silence, their son had a voice. The relief was overwhelming. Of course he can talk, Quinn said, pulling her close while Tommy played with wooden blocks at their feet. Your silence is not genetic, love, and even if it was, we would have loved him just the same. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. The trading post continued to prosper, becoming the anchor of their family's security. Samuel's health remained stable, and he spent his days doting on his grandson and helping with lighter tasks at the store. Lily managed the business side with increasing confidence, her written correspondence with suppliers and customers earning respect throughout Kansas. Tommy grew into a talkative toddler, chattering constantly in a way that made Quinn laugh and declare, "He got my tendency to talk and his mother's brains. We are in trouble." On Tommy's second birthday, the family gathered for a small celebration in their home. As Lily watched Quinn hold Tommy on his lap, both of them laughing at some silly game, she felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This life, this family, this love had all seemed impossible 3 years ago when she was trapped in silence and fear. Quinn caught her watching and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" Lily wrote. "How lucky I am. How grateful." "The luck is all mine," Quinn said softly. "You took a chance on a dusty cowboy who wandered in looking for work. You gave me everything I did not know I was searching for." That night, after Tommy was asleep and they were preparing for bed, Lily tried something she had not attempted in years. She opened her mouth and willed sound to come out. A small noise emerged, barely a whisper, but it was there. Quinn's head snapped up. Lily, did you just... She tried again, and this time a breathy yes emerged, barely audible but unmistakable. Quinn crossed the room in 3 strides, cupping her face. Your voice. Oh God, Lily, your voice. She tried to speak again, but the sound died. Frustration crossed her face. It is all right, Quinn said quickly. Do not force it. If your voice is coming back, we will take it slowly. No pressure. Over the following months, Lily's voice gradually returned, though it never fully recovered. She could speak in whispers and sometimes in soft, breathy tones, but long conversations exhausted her, and in times of stress, the silence returned completely. But it was enough. She could tell Tommy she loved him. She could whisper to Quinn in the dark. She could say her father's name. I waited, she whispered to Quinn one night, the words coming easier than they had. I waited so long to speak again, and now I find I don't need to. You taught me there are other ways to communicate. But I am glad you have this back, even partially, Quinn said, because I love hearing you say my name. Quinn, she whispered, and he shivered. Yes, exactly like that. They made love that night with a new tenderness, Lily whispering fragments of sentences between kisses, Quinn responding with the flood of words she had grown to love. 2 halves of a conversation, perfectly balanced. The years passed with the steady rhythm of life on the frontier. The trading post expanded again, adding a section for farming equipment. Samuel eventually retired completely, spending his final years peacefully before passing away in his sleep at 70, content in the knowledge that his daughter was well cared for. Lily and Quinn had 2 more children, a daughter named Rose, who had her mother's auburn hair and her father's gray eyes, born when Tommy was 4, and another son named James, who arrived 2 years after that. The house that had once seemed too big for 2 people became filled with laughter and chaos and love. Quinn never stopped narrating life, though now he had 4 people to talk to instead of 1. He told his children stories about how he met their mother, about the day Tommy was born in a snowstorm, about Kansas and the frontier, and the importance of hard work and kindness. Your mother is the bravest person you will ever meet, he told them often. She survived tragedy and trauma and kept going. She built a business and a life through sheer determination. Never forget what she has overcome. Lily, her voice still soft and often failing, wrote them letters that she would read aloud when she could, telling them about their grandmother who died too young, about the Comanche raid and how it changed her, about finding love when she thought she would always be alone. I haven't spoken in 3 years, she read to them one night from a letter she had written to preserve the memory, her voice barely audible but steady. That is what I wrote to your father the first day we met, and he said, Then I will talk for us both, Quinn finished, pulling her close. Best promise I ever made. Tommy grew into a serious young man who took over much of the trading post operations, having inherited his mother's head for business. Rose proved to be wild and adventurous, constantly pushing boundaries and driving her parents to distraction. James was quiet and thoughtful, content to spend hours reading or helping his mother with correspondence. When Tommy turned 21, he announced his intention to marry Sarah Henderson, the daughter of the boarding house owner who had once given Quinn directions on his first day in El Dorado. The wedding was a grand affair, and as Lily watched her son stand at the altar, she felt the full circle of life spinning onward. Our baby is a man, she whispered to Quinn, who stood beside her with tears in his eyes. I know. When did that happen? When we were not looking. Years continued their steady march. Rose married a rancher and moved 20 miles west, giving Lily and Quinn 4 grandchildren who visited often. James became a teacher, never marrying, but finding fulfillment in educating the next generation of El Dorado's children. Tommy and Sarah had 3 children and took over the trading post completely, allowing Lily and Quinn to step back and enjoy their later years. On their 20th anniversary, Quinn took Lily back to the hilltop where he had first told her he loved her. They were older now, gray threading through their hair and lines marking their faces, but the love between them had only deepened. 20 years, Quinn said, standing with his arm around her waist as they surveyed the Kansas prairie. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I walked into that trading post. Sometimes it feels like you have been part of my life forever. Forever is good, Lily whispered, her voice stronger than it had been in years. Forever with you is everything. Do you ever regret it? Marrying a wandering cowboy who had nothing to offer but words and work? Lily turned to face him fully, her green eyes clear and certain. Never. Not once. You gave me my life back, Quinn York. You loved me when I could not speak and celebrated with me when I found my voice again. You gave me children and grandchildren and a partnership I never dreamed possible. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I did not think that was possible. Quinn pulled her close, and they stood there on the hilltop as the wind whispered through the grass. Two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, a cowboy who talked, and a woman who had been silent, making a whole that was greater than the sum of their parts. As the sun set over the Kansas prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Quinn began to talk, narrating their view and their history and all the love that had brought them to this moment. Lily listened, her hand in his, and felt grateful for every single day that had led her here. They returned to El Dorado as darkness fell, to the town that had witnessed their love story, to the home they had built together, to the life that had seemed impossible until a dusty cowboy had walked through a door and offered to speak for them both. Years later, when Lily was 70 and Quinn 73, they sat on the porch of their home, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who had gathered for a summer celebration. Lily's voice came and went these days, sometimes strong and sometimes silent, but it no longer mattered. She and Quinn had long since perfected their communication. Tommy, now middle-aged and prosperous, raised a glass. "To my parents," he said, "who taught us that love is about accepting each other completely, differences and all, who showed us that talking and listening are both important, and that sometimes the most powerful communications have no words at all." The family cheered, and Quinn pulled Lily close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I love you," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I have loved you since the day I met you, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Lily whispered back. And though not everyone heard the words, everyone saw the truth of them in the way she looked at him. They lived out their final years in El Dorado, dying within months of each other, as couples who have truly bonded sometimes do. Quinn went first, peacefully in his sleep, and Lily followed soon after, her heart simply deciding it had had enough without him. The town buried them side by side, on a hill overlooking the prairie they had both loved. The headstone read, "Quinn York and Lily York." He talked, she listened, and together they built a love that changed the world around them. Their descendants continued to run the trading post for generations, each one hearing the story of how their great-great-grandparents met. The tale of the woman who could not speak and the cowboy who promised to talk for them both became part of El Dorado's history, told and retold as an example of how love finds a way. And in the quiet moments, when the Kansas wind whispered through the grass on that hilltop, those who believed in such things swore they could hear it, a man's voice, deep and melodic, narrating the view and the weather and the passage of time, and occasionally a woman's whispered response, full of love and contentment and a life well lived. The story of Quinn and Lily York proved what the frontier had always taught those willing to listen, that strength comes in many forms, that differences can be bridges rather than barriers, and that the most profound connections often require no words at all, just two hearts beating in rhythm, two lives intertwined, and a love that spoke louder than any voice ever could. Their great-grandson eventually wrote their story in a book that was published in 1935, preserving for future generations the tale of how a silent woman and a talkative cowboy built an empire of love in the wilds of Kansas. The book's dedication read simply, "For great-grandmother Lily, who taught us that silence can be powerful, and great-grandfather Quinn, who taught us that words are gifts. Together, they taught us that love is the language that matters most." The trading post stood for nearly a century before being converted into a museum dedicated to frontier life and the history of El Dorado. In the main room, where Quinn had first reorganized shelves and Lily had first written, "What do you need?" on a scrap of paper, there hung a framed photograph of the couple taken in 1895. Quinn stood tall and proud, his arm around Lily's waist, while she looked up at him with an expression of such love and trust that visitors often stopped and stared, moved by the obvious depth of feeling captured in that single moment. Beside the photograph was the original piece of paper on which Lily had written, "I haven't spoken in 3 years," and Quinn's written response, added years later when Lily asked him to record his reply for posterity, "Then I'll talk for us both." The paper was yellowed and fragile, protected behind glass, but the words remained clear, a testament to a promise kept, and a love that transcended all barriers. Tourists came from across Kansas and beyond to visit the museum, to hear the story of the silent woman and the talking cowboy, as they became known in regional folklore. School children wrote essays about them. Scholars studied their business records, impressed by the acumen that had built such a successful enterprise. But mostly, people came to stand in that room and imagine the moment when two lonely souls found each other and decided to build a life together against all odds. The curator, a descendant of Rose York, made sure to tell the complete story to visitors. "People romanticize it," she would say, "but what Quinn and Lily had was real work. Marriage is always work, and theirs had extra challenges, but they chose each other every single day. That's what made them extraordinary. Not the silence or the talking, but the choosing." In the museum's archive room, carefully preserved, were boxes of Lily's written correspondence, her neat handwriting filling hundreds of letters to suppliers, customers, and friends. There were also Quinn's journals, started at Lily's suggestion, where he had written down the stories he told aloud, wanting to preserve them for future generations. The journals revealed a man of depth and sensitivity, someone who thought deeply about life and love and the nature of connection. One entry, dated July 1885, read, "Today, Lily whispered that she is grateful her voice never fully returned. She says the years of silence taught her to listen truly, and that is a gift she would not trade. I told her I am grateful too, because those years taught me to value every word I speak and to understand that sometimes the most important things cannot be said at all. We are both better for what we have survived." Another entry from December 1890. "Rose asked me today why I talk so much. I told her that when you love someone who struggles to speak, you learn to fill the silences not because they are uncomfortable, but because words become gifts you can give. Every story I tell, every observation I share, is my way of saying I love you, without repeating the same phrase until it loses meaning. Lily understands, she always has." The museum also displayed the family Bible, where Quinn had written extensive notes about each of his children and grandchildren, his flowing script filling the margins and blank pages with observations and memories. Next to his entries were Lily's, written in her precise hand, complementing and expanding on Quinn's words. Together, their writings created a complete picture of a family bound by love and strengthened by adversity. On the 50th anniversary of the museum's opening, the town of El Dorado held a special celebration, inviting York descendants from across the country. They came in droves, hundreds of people who could trace their lineage back to Quinn and Lily, representing every possible background and profession. Standing together, they were a testament to the power of two people who had refused to let circumstance define their happiness. The eldest descendant present, a 93-year-old man named Quinn Thomas York, gave a speech that brought tears to many eyes. "I never met my great-great-grandparents," he said, his voice surprisingly strong, "but I have lived my entire life in their shadow, in the best possible way. My parents taught me the lessons they learned from their parents, who learned from theirs. Be kind, work hard, accept people as they are. Value actions over words, but do not underestimate the power of words either. Most importantly, love with your whole heart, even when it is scary, even when it is difficult. That is the York legacy, and it all started with a woman who could not speak and a man who promised to talk for them both. As the celebration continued into the evening, with music and dancing and the sharing of stories, the spirit of Quinn and Lily York seemed to hover over the festivities, binding together all these disparate people with the common thread of their ancestors' love story. In a quiet corner, away from the main celebration, two teenagers stood looking at the famous photograph. The girl, about 17, held her phone and seemed to be taking notes. The boy beside her watched her with an expression remarkably similar to the way Quinn looked at Lily in that old photo. "It's beautiful," the girl said, her voice soft, "that they found each other." "Yeah," the boy agreed. "Makes you believe that there is someone out there for everyone, you know? Even when things seem impossible." The girl looked at him and smiled. "Maybe especially then." They stood together in comfortable silence. Two more people touched by a story that had begun over a century earlier in this very building, when a woman picked up a pencil and a man made a promise that would echo through generations. As the sun set over El Dorado that evening, casting the same golden light that Quinn and Lily had loved, the prairie wind whispered through the grass on the hill where they were buried. And if you listened very carefully, if you believed in the persistence of love beyond death, you might have heard it. A man's voice, warm and rich, telling stories to the gathering darkness, and occasionally, so faint it might have been imagination, a woman's whispered laugh, full of joy and contentment and the satisfaction of a life well lived. The legacy of Quinn and Lily York lived on not just in their descendants, but in the very fabric of El Dorado itself. The town had grown and changed over the decades, but at its heart remained the values that Trading Post had represented: hard work, fair dealing, and the understanding that every person has worth, regardless of their circumstances. The current generation of Yorks, while not running a trading post anymore, had branched into various enterprises that served the community. Tommy's great-great-grandson ran a ranch that supplied beef to half of Kansas. Rose's great-great-granddaughter was a doctor who provided free clinics for those who could not afford care. James's descendants had founded a school for children with learning differences, understanding better than most that everyone communicates in their own way. Each of them carried forward the lessons learned from that original couple, that love means acceptance, that differences are strengths, and that the most important conversations happen not with mouths, but with hearts. In the end, the story of "I haven't spoken in 3 years." She wrote on paper. Cowboy said, "Then I'll talk for us both," was not really about silence or speech at all. It was about two people who saw past surface differences to the souls beneath. It was about a woman who learned that her value was not in her voice, but in her character, and a man who understood that true communication requires both speaking and listening. It was about the thousands of small choices they made every day to honor and cherish each other, to build a life together despite obstacles, to create a love that would ripple outward through time, touching lives they would never meet. And it was about the truth that has sustained humanity through every era and every challenge: that love, real love, the kind that transforms and endures and creates legacies, does not require perfect circumstances or perfect people. It only requires two hearts willing to try, willing to work, willing to choose each other again and again and again. Quinn York walked into a trading post in El Dorado, Kansas, on a hot July afternoon in 1879, looking for work and provisions. What he found instead was his whole life waiting behind a counter, holding a pencil and a piece of paper, unable to speak, but communicating everything that mattered with eyes the color of spring grass. He made a promise that day, one he kept for the rest of his life: "Then I will talk for us both." And he did. Oh, how he did. With words and actions and unwavering devotion, Quinn York talked for them both until Lily found her voice again. And even after, because by then talking was less about filling silence and more about sharing life. Together, they created something beautiful and lasting, proving that love is not about speaking the same language, but about being willing to learn each other's, to meet in the middle, to build a shared vocabulary of glances and touches and trust. Their story ended as all stories must, with death parting them temporarily until Lily could follow. But the love they built continued, passed down through generations, inspiring countless others to believe that somewhere out there is someone who will accept you exactly as you are, silence and words, and everything in between. And on quiet nights in El Dorado, when the Kansas wind sweeps across the prairie and the stars shine bright in the endless sky, you can almost hear it still, a man's voice, steady and sure, talking about everything and nothing, and a woman's whispered responses, sparse but perfect, the two creating a conversation that will never truly end because love, real love, transcends even death itself. This is how legends are born. This is how love stories become eternal, not through grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but through two people who refuse to let obstacles define them, who choose each other despite and because of their differences, who build something so strong and true that it echoes through time itself. Quinn and Lily York, the talking cowboy and the silent woman, two souls who found each other in the wild west of Kansas and created a love story for the ages, proving that sometimes the most powerful words are the ones we do not say, and sometimes the most beautiful sounds are the ones only the heart can hear.